Okay, I think my mic is working. Let's see here. All right, ladies and gents, welcome to the Noemi and Co podcast. Yep, trying to move my laptop here. Anyways, welcome. All right, so for today, you are catching me caffeinated, right? And in a happy mood because I just had therapy, but literally just a couple hours ago, I was crying because, and this is what I'm going to talk about today, the harsh lessons, as you saw with the title of this video, the harsh lessons that I've learned from starting an agriculture business in Africa and what I wish I knew before starting this like honey production and palm oil. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Noemi, and for those of you who do know me, welcome back. And as always, please subscribe and share my podcast with folks. But ultimately, allow me to reintroduce myself, because for me to get into today's subject, you also have to understand what is my tie to agriculture, or else I'm just like a phony repeating whatever random thoughts comes to mind, right? And that's one thing about my podcast. I talk about things that I'm executing because I'm on the ground doing the hard work for you, so that when you come to the continent, or you're looking to invest, or you're looking to do business here, you can come in with eyes wide open and not make the mistakes that I've made. So for context, I have a business out of DRC. Right now I'm in Nairobi, which is my second home. And in Nairobi, right now I'm registering the business as well. So there's two pillars in my ties with agriculture. When I was living in San Diego during COVID, I was working in tech for Silicon Valley remotely. My dad was sending me honey made from Bandundu, which is my origin. And it was from his cousin who works with cooperatives, and he was sending me honey. That honey, I was buying it from his cousin at $3 the liter, which is very competitive market pricing. Shipped to California, I would package it into jars, and then I would sell it online or in markets. And then palm oil, which is also what I'm involved in, is that my dad started this venture, and now the man is tired and old. But in Bandundu, my dad and I, we bought land, over 3,000 hectares, and I would say 20% of the land is used for beekeeping. We have 120 hives. The rest, we're trying to plant palm trees. And so that's my involvement with agriculture. Now, fast forward to today, 5 years later, my 120 hives, which if you know anything about beekeeping, wild bees, which is African bees, per hive, you're looking at about 1,000 kilo. No, 1,000 kilo is a ton. So just to make the math simple, 10 hives should really give you about 1 ton. You do 120 hive just to be safe, because you know that some hives are not going to produce as much. So 120 hives should produce about 1 ton. You guys, I literally just secured a buyer in California that wants 20 ton per year. But he was like, let's start with 1 ton. And I was like, great. My beekeeper calls me literally a week ago, and he's like, oh, Noemi, sorry, the hives have only produced 40 liters. You guys, from 1,000 kilos is equivalent to 1 ton, to 40 liters. 1 liter is equivalent to 1 kilo. Like, I'm like, what in the world am I supposed to do with 40 liters of honey? Why? The beekeeper that I hired as a manager, he is used to working with NGOs. He's not used to commercial beekeeping. He did not know the biggest barrier to beekeeping is bees themselves. This guy is catching bees traditionally when he sees them, rather than understanding that you need more bee colonies in order to produce quicker. With palm oil, here's my dilemma, and while I was in therapy earlier. You guys, when my dad started this business years ago, the thing with palm oil, just to not bore you too much, you have two types of fruits. You have the Dura and the Tenera. Tenera fruits, they have more oil in them, about up to 90%. Dura, up to 40 to 60% if you're lucky. We bought the fruits from them. At the time, I was not involved in the company. My dad bought the fruit, even built a refinery. Fast forward to today, only to find out 4 years later that the fruits were not Tenera fruits, which is what we paid for. And Tenera fruits are actually more pricey because they produce more oil. No, I hired an agronomist because I did my research. Shout out to AI. I was like, I need an agronomist to assess everything. The agronomist cuts the fruit in half and shows me. He's like, no, this is a Dura fruit. You guys were duped. And then the agronomist goes into the refinery that we built, and he's like, this machine was built by like a villager. Like, why would you do that when there's machine already imported in Kinshasa for palm oil that you could have just bought and literally plug it in and it works? You guys, I'm not sharing this to discourage you from doing agriculture in Africa, but I'm sharing my frustration and I'm going to give solution, don't worry, so that you don't make the mistakes that I've made. And so now that you have context of my work in agriculture, let's begin, okay? Oh. So, lesson number one. This one I know is going to rub some people the wrong way, but it has to be said. I think agriculture is a poor man's sport at the production level. Don't come after me. Hear me out. The reality is in agriculture, and I think the best example of this is actually coffee. At every level of the value chain. So when we talk about value chain, what does it mean? From the seed being planted on the soil to the consumer. So along that, there's logistics, there's production, all that jazz. You need to identify where in the value chain you need to set that you're gonna make money. And the reality is in any value chain, there's always the ones at the top that makes the most money, and there's always the ones at the bottom that make the least. And what I've come to conclude after 4 years is that the production, the farmers, they make the least amount of money. And I think that this is just a sad reality. And I know a lot of people will be like, well, we need to change that policy. Farmers work so hard, they deserve more money. I agree, they work hard, but I think we have to let go of this like merit model. Merit meaning that those that work hard should make the most money. And I really think in white collar jobs in the West, AI is proving that it's not so much the case anymore, right? But I think the reality with agriculture, I really think for me, now that I look back with honey, I've decided to shift the model of my company, Lubembo. So for Lubembo, our pillar is superfoods. Honey, moringa, baobab, and hibiscus. Instead of me killing my brain to produce honey, I realized what I'm very good at is sales. What I'm very good at is relationships. What I'm very good at is the deal flow. I'm able to fly to California in January, and I even document it, and I share how I close the sale within one trip. You know how hard it is for most African farmers to even have contacts like that? It's almost impossible. So my biggest leverage is what we call in French, mon carnet d'affaires. And I really think that in all reality, like when you look at the value chain in agriculture, the biggest value is just not at the farm. And it's never been that way. I mean, again, like I said, coffee, I think coffee is a great example of that. The farmer gets pennies, the roaster gets dollars, and usually the roaster rarely are local. Few of them are. The coffee shop, you know your girl's obsessed with coffee shop, they get the markup, the branding, the retailer, they get the premium sale. Who makes the most money? Not the farmer. And I really think the same is true for cocoa, for shea, and I think for me with honey. And the solution that I've come up with, in all truth, like I said, my biggest added value is the deal flow. It's, in all reality, I've lived in the West, I'm from Congo, now I live in Sub-Saharan Africa. I have this cultural nuance and fluency between markets that makes the most sense for me to be at the deal flow. But I also realize my job is to be an aggregator. My job is to find a bunch of producers, because in all reality, as much as at the production level, it's the lowest value chain in the value chain, a lot of farmers, especially in the context of Sub-Saharan Africa, it still is a livelihood, right? Like I said earlier, I was buying $3 the liter of the honey. That's actually our buying price when you're just producing independently and we buy from you as a cooperative in DRC. You'd be shocked, $3 the liter, and on average, I don't buy less than say 100 or 300 or 500 liters. That changes people's lives, right? And we cannot kid ourselves and think that that farmer can make millions of dollars overnight. That's just not realistic. But my job as an aggregator is to find a network of producers and make sure that when I buy from them, it's at least equitable. But I would be kidding myself if I was to think that I should have been a producer of honey. And you guys, 4 years, only 40 liters. Let that sink in and how dumb that is of me. And I take ownership. That was just dumb on my part. You live and you learn, and now you're crying to a therapist. Oh, let's go to lesson number 2, the producer trap. And this is where, and again, I'm gonna contradict myself here, but you need to be aware if you do the model that I'm doing, which is the aggregator model, which I really think for those of the diaspora, Westerners, you name it, your best positioning is actually to be an aggregator like me now. But you need to be aware that producers, they will turn on you. I'll give you a very simple example. My dad's cousin, the one that was supplying me the honey, and he still is. I think it was, right now by the time this episode airs, it'll probably be April. Right now we're April 1st, but I think it was last October. My operation manager in Congo calls him. She's like, hey, we just closed a honey sale. We need to export. I just wanted to know, where are you at with the cooperatives of giving us honey, and how much honey can you give us this year? Again, we agree on $3 a liter. And whenever you become a supplier, I lock you in for a couple years just because that helps me in terms of my budgeting and pricing. The guy wakes up and says to my operation manager, no, I'm going to charge you $6 a liter now. My operation manager is like, excuse me? Here's what this guy doesn't understand. The cost for us for that honey is actually $6 the liter, because by the time we go through Matadi port, by the time we get to US port in Miami and we have to pay custom tariffs, by the time it goes to the customer, all those fees, those producers, they don't get that. So this guy wakes up and asks for $6. Why? Because he's broke. He needs to pay for his medical fees and his kids' tuition. And we are the only buyer that buys from him consistently, which for him signals that we have money. Now, here's the thing. Should I be mad at this guy? Believe it or not, I'm actually not. Why? Because I understand his psychology. The guy's on survival. He's on survival, and the only way that he sees getting through is to jack up the price. But here's the reality. You and I cannot build a business based on survival. We're trying to build a business based on scale and profitability. And so how you work with that, if you're going to move towards the model of gathering from multiple producers, one, build a network of producers. Don't rely on one. Number two, this will contradict a bit the first point that I made, but although I don't see myself producing at scale, I really don't, I'm not gonna give up on my 120 hives, only because there's some buyers that literally just want half a ton of honey. And that in itself is easily, for me, based on my numbers, an $8,000 profit. So those small quantities, you still want them just in case there's a drought because of climate change. Producers are throwing a tantrum. You at least have a small production, but don't kid yourself. Your small production cannot be the end all be all. It's not enough to move to $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 sales. It's just not enough, but it's enough to meet the small demand. And in my case, actually, those small hives, I'm using them as a training site as well for other independent cooperatives that we're gonna work with. Okay. Okay, so I think the third lesson that I learned with agriculture that I really think people don't talk about enough. Agriculture is a very cash intensive business from day one. Like, I'm telling you, from day one, it requires so much capital. And unfortunately, it stays that way throughout the production cycle. What do I mean by that? I think for me, for context, I studied global health, my master's in Vancouver, but I was very lucky. My professor during my thesis, she was working on this research project in South Africa, transcribing medical records that were paper-based in TB and HIV into digital. So I really got into that wave. And when I graduated from my master's, my first startup was, again, digitizing medical records, but for maternal health units in Kivu, in Bukavu with Pansy. So early on, I kind of took on the wave of tech. And one thing I love about tech, although I'm very vocal about the fact that we don't need any more softwares in Africa, we need essential businesses. But one thing I love about tech that I really miss, you're able to start a product at a very low cost and scale it. So today, even with software, vibe coding, Replit will let you develop an app without even having to code. Claude is able to build you an app without having to know how to code. Like, that's the beauty of software. It's become so cheap to build a minimal viable product and then monetize. And I went into agriculture with that same mindset. I was like, let me start with the minimal viable product and then see where it goes. But you don't have that luxury in agriculture. From day one, if you want to produce for commercial purposes, which should be because you want to make money, You cannot, and you need a lot of money throughout the production cycle. Rather, it's the tools. I think a big issue that I see with a lot of small producers in sub-Saharan Africa, even the diaspora, from day one, you need to equip people with the right tools and move away from archaic production with like one machete and think that that's going to make you a lot of money. And I really think that for me, this was a big lesson with honey and especially with palm oil. Palm oil, I'm going to try to go quick on this one because it's a very complex agriculture plant. But the reality is, this is what people don't tell you about palm oil. Yes, in the West, they're like, oh, palm oil, the frustration, oh my God, fine, fair enough. But in all truth, palm oil is an essential food in many cultures, especially sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. And it's used for cosmetics. A lot of people don't know that palm oil is one of the basic tools in cosmetic ingredients. So here's what happened with palm oil. Palm oil, just the seed alone. DRC, back in colonial times, we used to be actually the biggest producers of palm oil. Can you believe Unilever used to have a site in Bandundu? Today, we have to import the seed from Indonesia and Malaysia. So then that seed, it's so expensive, and especially Tenera. Tenera, again, going back to what I shared earlier, the reason why the Tenera fruit is very more expensive, the seed, again, after 3 to 4 or 5 years, the fruit is giving you an insane amount of oil. Here's the thing with palm oil. It's very pricey, just the seed. And then you're getting now to the second step, the pre-nursery. You got to take the seed, put them inside compost. If you do compost, either you have feces and compost matter that you have from your cows, which is cost, or you got to buy compost, mix it with soil. That's cost. And then you got to put that combination into what I call poly bags. These are these sturdy bags. You take the seed, you put it in. You guys, all that I just said is all costs. And then you got to put it under the shade. So you either use palm trees, palm leaves, or you buy like a shaded green bag that they sell. That's cost. Then you got to build a greenhouse because you got to transport the poly bags into the greenhouse to continue at a certain temperature for 3-4 months. That's cost. Then you got to take that and put it, you have to 90 centimeters in between each. You guys, it is an entire methodology, an entire science. And then guess what? You need labor. In an ideal world, the labor in Bandundu would be impeccable. Guys, I'm having to spend time creating manuals with icons in order for people to follow instructions that they continue to not follow. So literally, just to give you simple math, right now this year, my goal is to plant 150 hectares of palm seed. In that, you have well over 8,000 seeds, by the way, for 150 hectares. I lost 1,000 seeds. And I'm not going to tell you how much I spent on that because you just fall on the floor. But here's the thing with palm oil. It is so lucrative in the domestic market that I know someone that has, I think, about 5,000 hectares of palm trees in Equateur, central of DRC. He makes well over $3 million a month. And this is it, right? But the reality is the capital required to invest in this from day one is so costly. I'm losing sleep. I'm not sleeping because I've literally run out of cash. And I'm like, how do I sustain this production? And it takes 3 to 5 years. It's not like a chicken coop or my maize, which takes 3 months, 3 to 5 years. And I really think, again, pretty much my solution to this, if I had to do it differently, and I think this is not for everyone, again, I think I would have done the aggregator model. What do I mean by that? I would have first secured a sale. A lot of companies in DRC, and I think it's the same in Nigeria because one of my friends in Nigeria does palm oil. She said the same thing. A lot of palm oil companies that buy palm oil, either for cosmetic use or to resell for kitchen use, they prefer that you have a minimum production quantity of 5 ton. They're not gonna take 1,000 kilo from you or even 1 kilo or 10 kilos. What are they gonna do with that for industrialization? What I would have done is secure first the buyer, hear their needs, the cost, how much they're gonna buy the palm oil for. Secondly, the aggregator model. I would have found a community, an area in DRC or parts of Nigeria or God knows where, or even Ivory Coast has a lot of palm trees. Work with independent producers that are a bit spread out, invest in a pickup truck or something that picks up their fruit. I pay them per kilo of the regime, kind of like what we do with honey. And then I invest in small little machines that will press the juice out, and I will commercialize on the oil and the kernel. And I think that's what I would have done, is like prove that first before investing in the production. Because I really just think that the production in palm oil is such a pain. Why not capitalize on people that already have the palm trees but that are not able to sell it, and be the bridge between the two? That's what I would have done. Now, let's go to another lesson that I learned. I think this one, to be honest, I kind of knew from day one, but I see so many members of the diaspora make this mistake over and over and over again. You guys, the reality with agriculture, it's a game of scale. I'm so sorry. It's a game of scale. It's a game of volume. If you are doing agriculture with small little quantities, once again, it's a poor man's sport. The amount of folks that I know that reach out to me, oh, Noemi, I want to start agriculture in Congo. I want to start with 10 hectares. Then my brain goes into the unit economics. I'm like, okay, right now in Congo, how much does a 20 kilo bag of maize sell for semoule? Okay, 10 hectares of maize, how much are you producing so that you can sell it? You guys, the reality is scale is very costly. Again, it goes back to my previous point. This is what kills a lot of producers in Africa. They're too small to be efficient, but they're too big for it to be a hobby. I'm gonna give you guys a full example. I have a really good friend of mine in the Katanga region. They do a lot of corn there. For those of you who don't know the history of the DRC, we're a big country, Congo, really massive. And different parts of Congo, different tribes have their quirks, as I like to call it, right? Katanga, they're known for corn. Like, these guys consume corn more than I drink water. It's just an insane staple food for them. And given the temperature of the DRC, it's incredible to grow corn. And corn, the beauty about corn, it has a 3-month cycle. And corn, really, with 100 hectares, you can plant a lot. Now, here's the thing with my friend, though. He had a career in mining. He was able to take $3 million, which in mining, if you know, you know, that's nothing. He took $3 million in mining and invested in industrializing corn. So he owns well over 5,000 hectares and he industrializes. So he has an entire factory. This guy makes, I think he told me the numbers last night on the phone and I had to write it down. I think he said, I'll have to find my numbers, but I think what he said is that he makes well over $2 million per quarter. So that's every 3-4 months. And what he usually does is that, from my understanding, 9 months out of the year, he's in production and sales at the end of the quarter. But 3 months out of the year, he's just like revamping the soil, because you have to constantly treat the soil. So here's the thing with that, though. Again, this is a lot of money that most people, when they're starting, they don't have. But I think what's very smart with my friend, he walked me through how he started. He bought the land, which he could, but he started with 100 hectares. Why did he start with 100 hectares? And he started with like mini machines out of China that you plant, and he worked with local mamas as a cooperative that were planting, and they were paying him in production, and then he was paying them in return in like M-Pesa. He started small, but slowly he started with 100 hectares. Again, not 10 hectares, 100 hectares. This is what starting small in agriculture is. He started with 100 hectares. He mastered producing 100 hectares and then added 200 hectares, then added 300 hectares. And before you know it, 5,000 hectares of maize and industrialized. You guys, this is just the truth of agriculture. You're not going to make any money by starting with 10 because you're risk adverse and you want to test it first. You guys, agriculture is a science. AI, Google will help you map out how to do it. But the tools, the capital to invest in the machinery, the capital to invest in the labor, the capital to invest in the agronomist that's going to follow through on the science, that's your biggest investment and your biggest cost. Not starting with 10 hectares, right? And I really think the fourth lesson, by the way, I think that this goes with the fourth point that I want to make is the funding gap. I think one thing I find so frustrating in business, this is a global issue actually, even in the West, people are not transparent about money. Like, they will talk to you about their successes. We all love a success because life is hard. To hear someone rant all the time about their struggles, like me sometimes on this podcast, is a bit demoralizing. However, I would like to think that I'm providing you guys solutions sometimes. But the reality is there's a funding gap. There's a reason why small agriculture businesses don't really get funding. Those of you in the comments that are going to be like, well, there's actually grants. I'm sorry, I come from the NGO world. Grants don't move the dial. Grants are your seed money. For example, a grant maybe can help me buy some hives for my cooperatives. I produce beehives at my farm, Langstroth, for commercial use that we give to the cooperative that are part of our network. But if you want to just buy hives from us, it's minimum $50 to $60. If you're getting a $2,000 grant or $5,000 grant, how much is that going to cover? And how many hives can you even produce with that? And the grant does not cover the agronomist costs. Most agronomists are like $2,000 to $5,000 in fees for their knowledge. It doesn't cover tools. It doesn't cover technology softwares. Like, you guys, this is just a sad truth. Small farmers, I've noticed, people that do small agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa, you're too big for microloans. Microloans on average, $5,000, ridiculous interest fees. The smaller the microloan, the bigger the interest fee. But then commercial banks, you don't have the 3-year history of transaction, the collateral in order to qualify. Equity or like venture capital, most of them are not even in agriculture, but those who are, they want some ridiculous $1 million valuation. You're not there yet. So this is what I call the death zone of a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises in agriculture. And I think this is something that we don't talk about enough. There's just not that much funding for small agriculture players. I think there's many reasons. One, like I said, agriculture is a game of volume. An investor is looking at scale. They're like, this is an industry that works on scale. How am I going to make my money back? Two, in the case of sub-Saharan Africa, markets like Congo, even Cote d'Ivoire, which is very advanced in agriculture, most investors, they still see this market as very risky. So they want to invest in a business that is very likely to have a guarantee of massive sale. Maize, corn, maize, palm oil. But again, they know that the game of scale in the sector relies heavily on industrialization of processing the raw goods. And I really think that this is something we don't talk about. And I think for me, this is what I'm doing differently. And I'll close out on this. I talked about it many times before, but I think a lesson learned with my businesses. With palm oil, I'm not going to give up. It's a promise that I made my dad. I'm just really trying to find a way to find the investment. And I think my play is going to be to work with other African countries that are advanced in palm oil. Like Ivory Coast has a lot of funding in that. To be fair, the advantage that I have a massive land. I've already planted last year 100 hectares. Now I just closed 150 hectares. So I do have a bit more weight. I'm going to forget about microloans because I've tried. They're just useless and I'm not going to bother with them. But I think that looking for more like development funding, and this is the thing with development funding, you guys, if you're a small business, you need to forget about it. Development funding, I've learned, they take too long, or they only fund institutions. Look at the African Development Bank, the World Bank, IMF. I'm sorry, at some point we have to stop like falling into their stupid trap. They're very good at like advertising that they're developing Africa. But when you look at when and who they've given money to, it's always institutions. So for me, it's a matter of getting into an institution in Congo that's a recipient of those funds and making sure that my farm becomes a part of that sort of funding pool at the ground level. I think with honey and even palm oil, actually, I think if I had to do it differently, and this is what I'm doing with the honey, I'm becoming an aggregator. Even with the palm oil, in the meantime, until I find some kind of funding, I'm gonna put more time in gathering the palm trees in Bandundu. There's people that already have palm trees. Gather those palm fruits, pay them for fruit, press it, sell it in Kinshasa. And in Kinshasa right now, for transparency, I already closed a confirmation deal with 2 businesses that are in cosmetic, and they're like, we need like, and one of them I had to like beg him. I was like, 5 ton, I don't know about that, but 2 ton I can do in Bandundu from local people. And so we agreed on that. Hopefully that cash will give me some money to reinvest in my production business. And with the honey, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna work with farmers. My job is to equip them to be compliant, to have best practices of commercialization, cap them at a certain price per liter, and then secure the buyer, because that's what I'm good at, is deal flow. And that's my best mode. So again, I'm not sharing this so that when you're watching it, you're like, well, Noemi said I should not go into agriculture production. That's not what I'm saying at all, actually. But I think you gotta be smart and see things for what they are. There's a reason why even in the West, you go to most family farms in the US or in Canada, literally there's like 2 people on staff. Machines have maximized the production site. And in all truth, it's sad with the West, the food that's sold is so processed because they need to meet demand for the population. So Western agriculture is moving to lab, indoor, and all that jazz. Africa, we still have a long way to go because we have so much untapped land, especially countries like DRC. However, I think that if you're going to go into agriculture, do your unit economics and your research, secure the capital first before you go into production. And if you're going to go into production, you got to transition to industrialization and not just stay at the production level because it's a poor man's sport. I'm so sorry. And then if not, you do what I'm doing with the honey, you become an aggregator. So your job, especially I think the members of the diaspora, this is actually something that we could be very good at. Your job is to gather the goods and secure the buyer and then pay these farmers a fair price, please. That's really important. And then take it from there. Anyways, thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful. Be sure to subscribe and share and have a good day.